Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the How to Choose Happiness and Freedom Show. I'm your host, Lauren Foster, happiness teacher and author of Happy and Free on Purpose, Daily Practices to Live and Love Your Life. If you don't already have your copy of the book, head over to laurengfoster.com and check that out. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Audible, you can get it anywhere you like, and learn to be the master of your life. I am so honored and grateful and excited to welcome my guest today, Jan Hoath. Hi, Jan.
Hi, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here too, and just excited.
Uh, yeah, me too. My new friend. And this whole podcast experience has brought so many amazing women into my life that I never would have met otherwise. And I love being able to meet people like you who have a different perspective than I do. Of course, everybody has a different perspective than me. We're all different. And but you have some very unique things that I'm really excited to learn and share about. So welcome, and start by telling us who you are and how you got here, and how you have that bright shiny smile.
Well, gosh, where do I dive in? I mean, like you, like I grew up with a big heart and a delight for life that was undeniable. Like from birth, I would say I saw rainbows and unicorns, and I still do, by the way. But, you know, I grew up on a path of just having a passion for life and a passion for people. And yet I was constantly the new girl. And I constantly had to bump up against the not happy, not joy times in my life. And yet, when I allowed myself to follow the pieces that brought me joy, that brought me happiness, then it obviously led me on a different path. And one of that paths kind of started when I graduated college, and I had the option. I had a career path option of going into corporate, and then I decided to go ski instruct. And I was a professional ski instructor in Aspen for almost a decade. And I realized that I loved skiing, yes. And I loved passing the passion of skiing, yes. But it was passing the passion of life in the conversations that I had with my guests on the chairlift that really lit me up. And then when I realized there was this whole industry called coaching and life coaching, I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I want to be with, the whole of the person, not just one aspect of their life, which, at the time was skiing.
Right.
And so um, I knew I wanted that. I was excited for that. But then life came along, and I did have an experience that was the catalyst to kickstarting my business, which we can get into in a little bit. But ultimately, I always knew that I was passionate about people. I always knew that I loved bringing the best out of people. And I always knew that this life is a gift, that our joy and our happiness is a gift, and that our own personal self expression is a gift. But all of it is for us to claim for ourselves. Like that's that whole free choice piece. And so actually back in 2007, I did, through skiing, I met an amazing Australian man, and we married, and his parents were over visiting us from Australia. And it was a holiday weekend. It was busy. We had had a beautiful Thanksgiving, and we were in the Florida Keys at the time, and his parents wanted to go biking, and they borrowed my parents' bikes, and we let them go. But I had something heavy in my heart thinking I want to go with them, but I couldn't because we didn't have enough bikes. And then an hour later, we got that dreaded phone call that his mother had been tragically struck and killed. And that was in 2007. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm not, following through on this expression that I realize I have a gift for, and like a calling for, which I know you know. And so that when that moment happened, I was like, I got to step into my expression, because we don't know when we're going to leave. We don't know when our stint here in the world comes to a conclusion, at least in this formation, right? You know, whether you believe in past and future lives or not, it doesn't matter, because you're never going to be here in the same place in the same experience, and to make the most of it. And so, like, she was only a week into her retirement, and it just was like, oh my gosh, you know, like, I'm here to live a no regrets life. I'm here to lead and guide others to live a no regrets life, and to experience what that means for them and their own, you know. And I know you use happiness and I use the word joy, so this is going to be really fun to talk about.
Yeah.
But all this to say, I'm on a mission to spread joy and happiness in the world, and to invite women, men, everyone. I, you know, I have kids too. It's like, invite everyone up to realizing this gift of life, and how to claim it, how to receive it, and how to generate more of it. Because I just so believe that the more, and I know you do too, right? Like, the more that we stand in our joy, joy to the world starts with us.
That chills. It's awesome. I love it. I love your story. And you know, that I had a friend that died. I just found out suddenly, and I had lost touch with her. I didn't even know she was sick. And that just reminds you that you can't waste a moment. That this is, yeah, to hang on to the people that you love, and cherish this life, because you're right. We never know when this is our last day. So fantastic. Um,
I'm sorry to hear about your friend.
Yeah, me too. It's all good. But see, the gift is, now I'm reaching out to old friends. Like, okay, let's not let this happen to me. You know, this is, yeah, I won't, I'll learn. I'll stay in touch. I'll be available if someone needs help. I'll know, you know, what's happening in their life. It's just a reminder. And yeah, if it was always unicorns and rainbows, we'd
Yeah.
probably not appreciate the unicorns and rainbows anymore, right?
Exactly. Oh yeah. Oh, I know. I know we align on the contrast is as important
Yes.
as.
It would be a boring tapestry that didn't have any dark threads in it, you know? So, okay, so one of the other things, I use the words happiness and joy interchangeably. They're to me, they're just two different words for the same thing, but you have a different perspective, and I'm just dying to hear what to you the difference between joy and happiness is, and to learn that.
Absolutely, because it's been a journey, right? So I have a concept of, you know, a bespoke system process that I created called the happiness prism. So that was created when I was really doing some deep self-reflection, gosh, almost a decade back. And I just tuned into this awareness of my own, because I just was really tuned into the world, happiness, 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 and just wanted to be happy. And, you know, part of my story is that I had depression in high school, really deep depression, and I had happy pills. And I remember I just hated them. I hated them. I never appreciated taking them. I know I was told to take them, and at 16 I didn't know, you know, what else to question at the time. um but so the word for me, happy, was always there. I just want to be happy, because in that time I was not happy, right? And then as I continued to move through my life, and I mean, I ultimately healed myself from depression, and that's kind of part of my story. Um, but what was for me so fascinating is, as I, you know, grew and developed and moved through personal development and inward reflection, and developing this concept of the happiness prism, which was as a result of three major turning points in my life, including the tragedy of my mother-in-law, depression, and then another experience. I was really, you know, with even the camp of like happiness and happy. And then I had some experiences since then, and then being out in the world talking to different people in different areas of life, different walks of life, and started to realize, like, I had this whisper of joy come in, and I had never really sat with joy, and really found that was so fascinating to hear, you know, other people's experiences of the word happy and happiness. And one of the people happens to be pretty close with the Dalai Lama. And I remember telling her about my happiness prism, and she was like, that's hard for me. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And so she was sharing with me, for her, joy is like a deeper space of connection to understanding, like the darkness as much as the light. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because to be honest, for me, I do interchange the words happiness and joy. And yet, the more I sat with joy, and I sat with, for example, the Dalai Lama's um, expression and definition of joy, where he talks about that's more within, whereas happiness seems to be like something to attain, which, as we both know, it's like unattainable, right? When it's outside of you. But the fascinating thing was that when I was playing with this and sitting with this, then I sat with joy and came to a place of like, it's an acronym for me, to just own you.
Ah,
And
okay.
so as I teach joy, it's just owning you, and yet I still have my concept of the happiness prism, because I ultimately do believe it's radiating that energy. And as Eckhart Tolle says, words are just a signpost to something more. So whenever I'm teaching it, and or speaking to it in a speaking event or anything like that, for me, I do invite forward the aspect of define it for yourself. And yet, with the acronym of joy, I get to be able to play with that it's just owning you. But what I believe you and I see as happiness can be that joy, that it is that depth of just sheer delight, even in the darkness, even in the hardest times, even in the biggest upsets, heartbreak, that there still is a space of joy possibility, or happiness possibility. But I feel like a lot of people, as a general cultural statement, see happiness as something that's not attainable and outside of them. But what I found when I talk to joy, people are like, oh, I kind of get that. So it was just really interesting, because I started out in the like happiness camp, and then I started to kind of branch out and realize, we're all pointing at the same thing. To be honest,
Yeah, we are.
it's getting to a place of, it's kind of like, do you speak other languages?
I'm trying my best to learn Spanish and I'm getting pretty good at it, but
Awesome. But the fascinating thing, so um like part of my story with the depression, I ended up, long story short, while I was deep in depression, a German substitute teacher saw something in me and said, hey, Jan, I really think you ought to consider applying for the scholarship to go to Germany and be an exchange student. And I was like, what? And then all of a sudden, what? Like a big light bulb went off. And I just poured my heart into the application, because it was like, this is an opportunity to get out of my town, to get out of my life. At the time, I was a swimmer, dislocated my shoulder. The doctor said you can't swim anymore. I identified myself as swimmer, and I didn't know who I was and what I was at that point. And so it was like I had to create a new identity, and that's where I'd fallen into depression. But all of a sudden, this opportunity, which is the first aspect of the happiness prism, is play, that I realized I required to put something out in my future that was so delightful, so playful, that that's how I healed my depression. And of course, I did get the scholarship. I was an exchange student in Germany for a year as a teenager. And this was back in the 90s, before we had internet. So I had a lot of freedom. I
right.
didn't have social media following me or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
Um, but, but what was more beautiful is I had a very awesome introspective experience, because I was away from everything that I knew, like one phone call to my parents a month. But all this to say about languages is, when you learn another language and immerse yourself in a culture, you see a different dynamic. And, I love prisms and the whole idea. And like, it's like the idea of that, when you start to understand and you get into someone else's culture, someone else's way of thinking, the world becomes very dynamic. And especially like there's words in German that you can kind of explain in English, but you can't really translate. And the same with Spanish and any other language. And so for me, language is everything, right? Because it's what creates our world. It's what creates our experience. And when I was on this journey between moving through happiness and joy, and that's where I still interchange the both, but realizing I'm committed to communicating to people at where they are in their journey with their relationship with the idea of happiness, whether they think they can have it or not. And realizing that, it's getting to know and learn people's languages so that you can speak to them and realize again, we're pointing at the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so walk me through what the happiness prism is.
Yes. So the happiness prism is essentially this framework that came to me in some very pinnacle moments and divine downloads when I was like, okay, universe, what the heck's going on here? I'm noticing a pattern here in my life. And so, like I shared this story with depression, and play was the first aspect of the prism, and realizing that there's faucets that we require to be optimized to be our best selves. And this notion of, it was around the time of not that long after Happiness Project came out, and Pharrell Williams had his happy song, um,
I
because I'm happy. Do you
Yeah.
remember that one? And all these things. So it was like buzzing in me. And I'm like, there's something that wants to come through me as a concept to be able to share with people, to simplify how do you find your own happiness? Because it's like, people think I walk around as just a big smile and happy being like you. Like it's like, people just think you're this naturally that way. And it's like, well, actually, no, let's really have a conversation here.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what I realized was the three major turning points of my life: when I had depression, and then my mother-in-law was the tragic moment that was the catalyst to starting my business. But it was also a moment when I realized we needed progress. Like we need to progress in this life. And as I defined progress as purpose in motion, play I define as joy in motion. But then there was another pinnacle moment that when my son was 6 weeks old at the time, and my daughter was 2 weeks old, or sorry, 2 months old, we had an experience where I was changing his little onesie and something wasn't
Wait,
right.
wait, 6 weeks and 2 months?
Yeah, sorry. So I had my young kids. So I had a 2-year-old daughter
Okay.
and then a
And
6-week-old baby.
6 weeks.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, that's confusing. Yeah. So I had a
Twins, but not really at the same time. Okay, sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
right. No, it didn't make sense. So my 6-week-old son, though, I was changing his little onesie and something wasn't right. His arm was kind of like off shape. It was large, but it didn't look swollen, but it was so strange. And so we called the doctor and he's like, well, we need to take, x-rays. So go straight to the hospital. Well, the doctor at the hospital, and at the time we were living in the Florida Keys, so we were away from major hospitals. I mean, they had the local. And he's looking at the films and said, you need to go to the Miami Children's Hospital. Do you want to go by ambulance? And we're like, what? We have our daughter at her little preschool, and all of a sudden we're like, whoa, what is happening here? And he's like, just go to the hospital and you can talk to them. And we're like, so I got like almost no information. Well, we gathered our daughter, my husband and I, truck it up to 2-hour drive to the Miami Children's Hospital. And about 8 hours later, I'm sitting in the oncology wing of the Children's Hospital. They think he might have cancer. And it's like, what? And I'm sitting in the dark of that room going, what on earth? Like, this isn't my truth. This isn't my story. I don't get this. And so my husband and my daughter at that point had to go back to the house because only one of us could stay in the room. And I was a breastfeeding mom. And I'm looking at my beautiful baby boy going, what on earth? And this was the first time that I sat there and tears in my eyes, and, like the darkness of the room, like I can see the scene. It looks like a scene in a movie because it still feels like not reality. And that's the first time I looked up and said, help. And that's when, up until then, my business was life coaching. And that was the pinnacle moment, my spiritual awakening, where it was like, I'm a spiritual life coach, because I was like, this is beyond me. I can't think my way out of this. Because up until then I had understood, you change your thoughts, you change your life, right? No, I'm sorry. I needed more than a better thought at this point, And so I didn't have like an aha in that second, but I obviously gave it up and let it out. And then the next morning, so that moment was the part where I connected to peace, which is the third side of the prism. So the prism is essentially like a pyramid prism. And in simplest form, it's a triangle. So 3 sides. And I do prism breaths, where we put thumbs together, pointer fingers together over the heart center, and create a triangle to breathe in and call in the 3 energies of the prism. But essentially, peace being prayer in motion. And prayer being non-religious, but we're talking about tuning into that larger aspect. And between these 3 major life events, I realized that, look, we don't want to wait for the major life events, that we can actually attune to the energies of play, peace, and progress on a daily basis. And those are the practices that I teach my clients. Those are the practices that I lead and live by to have created my Pinch Me life. Like, I'm coming to you from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I live in a beautiful cabin in the woods, and I live a pretty darn dreamy life. And it's because I've created that, though. And you and I both know too, like, it's a conscious created life to allow and embrace happiness. And a lot of times it goes against the grain. But that's where, even the experience in the hospital, it wasn't just peace that got us out of there, because I don't want to leave you all hanging.
Right.
Right. So that was the first night that's when I tuned into peace, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and I needed to get some breakfast, and realized, as the breastfeeding mom, I could order off the menu, and it's the children's hospital. And guess what? I looked down through my tears and I realized I can order Fruit Loops. And the first thought that comes to mind is, you can't order Fruit Loops. That's not nutritional. That's not going to serve you and your son. And then the larger voice came in and goes, this isn't for your physical nourishment. This is soul nourishment. And so I ordered the Fruit Loops, and I enjoyed them, and I laughed at myself. And, my son's like, beautiful baby, just looking at me like, what are you doing, Mom? But he fed off my energy. Right. And so watching the colors swirl around in the cereal and everything else, that was my play that day. And that put me in that state of joy, happiness, high vibrational frequency, so that I was out of the darkness and could make sound decision, so that I was in a better energetic space to love on him. And then this is where I essentially danced around the prism, and that's what I teach and invite my clients to do as well. And really anyone listening, that when you look for your Fruit Loop moment on a day-to-day basis, to start, and then take a quiet moment to tune in, whether it's meditation or quiet walk, or beautiful bath, or whatever that quiet activity is, or full-on prayer, whatever that is for people to tune in, or journaling, and then taking the action. By setting myself up with play, then peace, then I could progress in a way that I could have the tough conversations with the doctors and not bawl my eyes out, that I could hear their sound advice. Because I don't know if you've been in that situation, or anyone listening, the doctors give all of their advice and it's scary. But then they're like, what would you like to do? And you're like, I want to put my son under a knife. What? Like, bone scan, what? Like, all this stuff that it's like, really, like, oh my gosh, making these tough decisions. Like, we had to have a blood transfusion. That was so hard for me to imagine. I just gave this baby boy life, and now someone else's blood's going to go into him. But it's like, well, if that's what's going to be the answer, so he stays. Yeah. So I essentially honored my happiness prism. Every day I was in hospital. And on the 12th day, they came in and said, you know what? We never got a full diagnosis. In fact, he's a medical mystery, but we will say he's a medical miracle too. And they said, look, that part's off the record, right? Because they can't say medical miracle on their chart, but they we think he's going to be okay. You're welcome to go home. And that was 12 excruciating days of talk about being conscious and staying in consciousness of possibility, because it was so committed. That's not how his story ends. But I don't know how I'm getting out of here. We're getting out here though. Well, on his 1-year birthday, we went back for a follow-up visit, and they thought they were going to have to follow up for 18 years. And they had the films out, and even the orthopedic had his smartphone out taking pictures. He was like, this kid really is a miracle. It doesn't look like anything ever happened. His body completely regrew. Everything's fine. And now he's a thriving 9-year-old boy. Right here, I'm squealing down the stairs, but he's, and all he has is this little mark on his arm that we're like, that's your Superman mark. Like that's your, like, you are a miracle. And it was so cute. For the longest time, he thought we all had him. He thought it was like a family stamp. So it's so sweet. But now he gets it, that it's his own thing. Like, no, you're a miracle. And look, everyone's a miracle, right? Like, we're all miracles walking. Like, it's the 412 trillion chance that each one of us came into this world. And yet he's, the different kind of miracle, the kind that like gets to keep going.
Yeah.
That I truly believe was a consciously created miracle. The trajectory he was on when we went into hospital was not good. And it took a conscious effort on all of us for us to say, this is not how this ends. And, I quite frankly, it was the first time I asked for people to pray for me and us. But the concept of the happiness prism doesn't have to wait till crisis moment. Right. So the happiness prism, it's my entire body of work. And I have actually journeys that go into the different aspects of the prism, the 7 rays of play, the 7 rays of peace, the 7 rays of progress. And that's my high level coaching experience for clients who are really looking to essentially transcend who they think they are, to know, capital K, who they really are in this life, because it's an experiential process. But on the fundamental, simplest level, right here now, listeners can already go out and sit down. And this is what I teach in my workshops, but just draw a triangle on their journal and take one action in play, one action in peace, and one action in progress. And then they will be optimized. You get to be optimized to be your best self, because what I realized too, when I just played and was in progress, something was missing. It's like the prism collapses, right? And we all are beings of light. And as beings of light, we want to shine bright. And yet, if we're not optimized, the radiance only goes so far. But when we have the harmony between, and I don't use the word balance, I don't know about you, but harmony, because there's an elegance and a movement and fluidity, whereas balance, it's always like trying to get into one spot. But what I found is when we harmonize and seek to, intend to harmonize between play, peace, and progress, and it's always a dance. Mm-hmm. That's when we radiate out. That's when we radiate those rainbows, and those rainbows are the ripple effect of impact that we're creating in our families and our businesses and our lives. And that's where we get to go to sleep at night, knowing that we did what we came here to do. That's where we go to the end of our lives and get to say, I did what I came here to do. And that's where I'm committed to, well, anyone who wants to listen to me long enough to live their no regrets life. Because I don't know about you, but that's my biggest fear, is to get to the end of this life and go, did I really do it all? Did I really honor the fullest aspect? Make sure everyone knows how much I love them. Make sure I, tried and failed and succeeded and triumphed. And then failed again to the fullest I possibly could. That's the life that I'm here to live, and that's the life I'm here to guide others to live. Just
And
owning them, you know?
and I know that everyone who encounters you is just inspired and motivated and lit up by your awesome passion and brightness, and you're a bright light. It's awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
It takes
we,
one to know one.
yeah. Well, I think you're going to love the book, by the way. You're going to go, oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You could have written my book.
Absolutely. I can't wait to read it. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I will be honored to experience
So
that.
along those lines, how wherever you all are listening or watching this video, if you look below, I'll provide all of these links for you. But how's the best and easiest way to get in touch with you and find out what you've got going on? If you have any free gifts, this is a great time to share those.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the easiest is janhoath.com. So that's JANHOATH.com. And that will take anyone listening to actually a couple of options. One, I have a free download, Waking Up to Your True Joy, in 3 simple steps. And then there's also a meditation that you get when you sign up for that. I also have a Joy Jumpstart experience, which is a 30-minute chat. And then there's also I have a Facebook group in there, but they can go check that out. It's kind of like a menu of options of possibilities for connection that I would be just honored. Like I mean, like you, it's like the more joy and happiness in the world, really the better for us all.
Yes, the better for us all, exactly.
And I just have to say, I love seeing your cats crawl around. I have kids crawling around.
I only have 5. It looks like there's 20, but there's only 5.
I love it. It's such a beautiful energy surrounding you.
Yeah, they're like, Mom, what are you doing? And there's a couple of dogs laying down here at my feet. So, and we're in the mountains too, in the Appalachian Mountains of East Tennessee, and in a cabin. So you and I live parallel lives.
Very parallel. Yeah, we got that happy nature vibe going on.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm so very, very happy. All right. Well, so janhoath.com is where you get in touch with Jan. LaurenGFoster.com is where you can go to watch this video again, or listen to the podcast, or explore any of the other options, look into the Happy and Free on Purpose book, all of that stuff. And so we're going to say goodbye for the moment. Is there anything you want to
add? Maybe like a loving takeaway to go look for your Fruit Loop moment today.
Look for your Fruit Loop moment today. I love that so much.
Yeah, because it's going to be spontaneous. It's not what you think, just like my whole experience, but I will promise you, you honor that, you will have a burst of happiness that just brings you freedom.
Yeah, completely. And I always start wrapping up early because I know that this happens. They're like, oh no, I wanted to say this, and then that reminds me of this and that. So I talk a lot in my work about the difference between motivated action and inspired action. And the motivated action is just the progress side of the prism, where you're just going, I have to do this, and I have to. When I was writing my book, I have to pound out X number of words a day. I didn't, of course, because that's not how I roll. But no,
that's not the creative flow. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to find a way to make this fun. I'm going to find a way to make this playful. I'm going to find a way to imbue this with joy and happiness and fun, or I'm not going to do it, because you're not going to get the results that you want. So I love the way that you've spelled this out. So there's play, there's progress, and there's peace. Play, peace, progress. In the proper order.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, in the proper order, because like in a culture, we jump into the doing. Like you said, you got to get so many words. And every time I go for that, I fall and fail so hard. But when my clients do, and clearly you're aligned in this energy, of course, that when we honor these aspects, we're setting ourselves up for so much greater success, but also greater potency. We both know that the words that you wrote on those pages were infused with love and joy and happiness and possibility versus the get or done energy. Like that's just a different energy, that the way words wouldn't be infused with the level of intentionality that you clearly brought to it. So
Great.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to redefine her takeaway because it's so important and you can do it right this minute. First, you look for your Fruit Loop moment, your opportunity to find playfulness and joy and fun in the moment. Then look inside yourself for your own peace that is there, that is who you really are. And then see what an action you're inspired to that will progress you in the direction of your dreams. Yeah, awesome. I love it so much.
I'm so excited. My dog's barking.
Oh, yay, I love dogs barking. We're lucky my dogs didn't bark. They always do.
I know. I have this Bernese Mountain Dog that's full of passion too.
Yeah, and he sees something out the window, so I get it. Good job, doggy. All right, we're going to be back next week with another episode in the Happy and Free on Purpose series and many more great guests to come. In the meantime, remember that happiness is a choice. You can always choose to be happy first. Say goodbye, Jen.
Mwah. Oh my gosh, this was so wonderful. Thank you.
Hang on.